So this Final Fantasy 16 video took a little bit longer than it should have because I decided to do New Game Plus first before making an impressions video. And that was a bit of a mistake. I shouldn't have done that, but that's hindsight for you. But at least I can talk about New Game Plus in this video too. So, to set the stage, Final Fantasy 16 is my most favorite Final Fantasy, single-player Final Fantasy, since 10. And 10 was a long time ago, so that's saying something. There's been quite a few Final Fantasy games since then, obviously. Why I say that is it succeeds in a lot of things I find really important when it comes to an RPG, particularly when it comes to story, characters I care about, character relationships I care about, and world building. I think it did quite a few of those things quite well. So that's why I can say it's my favorite since 10. And while I would still call this a great game, there are some game design features that do kind of bring down the overall experience a little bit. They hold it back from truly being a masterpiece. So I will talk about that too, but by and large, this is a positive review for the game. So let's focus on the good things first. Let's talk about the story. It was touted as like the Game of Thrones meets Final Fantasy type narrative, and it very much was. You got the politicking, and it's got the darker tone to it, which I really enjoyed. And it's got those really intense person-to-person relationships on display, particularly between some of the antagonists and protagonists. Just the way they hated each other and how they would interact when they were face-to-face and they're just spitting venom at one another. And the voice acting particularly really sold those scenes. Oh, I love it when there's a good English voice acting in games, particularly JRPGs. And it just sold it for me, and it totally enraptured me in the narrative, and it just kept my attention throughout the whole game. That more so than the more high fantasy elements. Of course, it's Final Fantasy, and you're going to have that really over-the-top high fantasy stuff, and that was cool, but it was when the nitty-gritty relationships between people that really sold this for me. So I really enjoyed that. And even the supporting cast too. Holy crap. Sid. Am I right? Sid was the star of this game. Every scene he was in, he stole the show. His voice acting was amazing. My God, anything to have a grumbly voice like that. I just thought he had the coolest voice. His design was good. He was charismatic, super likable. Probably a lot of people's favorite Sid in the entire franchise now. I'd have him right up there with Sid Highwind for my favorite Sid. He just absolutely loved him. And Jill, the main female protagonist, love her too. It's just such a stalwart companion, pillar of support for Clive, so kind, so strong, badass too. Just some really good supporting cast in this game. And Clive wasn't a bad protagonist either. I feel the supporting cast did kind of eclipse him a little bit though. And then the other thing with the supporting cast is in combat, you really notice their absence. Yes, this is a single player action RPG experience, but you still have companion AI controlled characters. But you never really felt their presence in combat even. You always felt alone. Even with Torgal, your trusty hound who you have throughout the whole game. I guess maybe it's just because it's so action focused and you really have to pay attention to what you're doing, dodging and timing attacks versus maybe a more turn-based game where you can take your time, enjoy the scenery, enjoy the combat, and it's just not as fast-paced. So it felt really lonely at times, even though you weren't alone. So that really kind of sucked. But when it came to combat as a whole, it was really enjoyable. Getting new abilities, trying out what worked, what could do the most damage, just figuring out what worked for you with all the different kind of icon abilities you get throughout the game. Made the combat quite fun. Definitely easy, but I guess I was expecting a little bit more difficulty because it was an action-based game, but it is still a Final Fantasy game and it's still an RPG. So I guess they made it a bit easier, but I don't have any complaints with that. I don't. Maybe more New Game Plus, we'll get to that later. So the combat was enjoyable too, and it really fit with this game and the story they were trying to tell with it, the action RPG combat, because of the icon battles. Those cinematic, over-the-top icon battles, I couldn't get enough of them. I was super compelled every time they were going on. Yes, maybe sometimes you'd end up watching a bit more than playing, but I was totally cool with that because of the spectacle on screen. Totally kept my attention throughout the entire experience. And I know the decision to go action RPG was very unpopular with 16. I'm very aware of that. But I think for this game and for the type of story they wanted to tell, particularly with the icon battles, they had to go action with it. I can totally see why, and I'm totally here for it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Do I want every game to be an action RPG going forward for Final Fantasy? God, no. And do I think it will be? Absolutely not. We will go back to turn-based eventually. It's just a matter of when. Maybe even the next game. I know it's been going more action oriented for a while, but I feel like it won't be like this forever. So story was good, combat was fun, music was good, VA was good, a lot of good. So the bad. First of all, I thought it was really quite odd, the economy of this game. Like, we get a ton of money, a ton of materials, and we don't really get to do a lot with them. We're making all this cash in the game, and the most you can buy money with when you get a lot of it is just music for the jukebox in your home base. Yes, you can buy accessories and stuff for your abilities, but after kind of finding a couple of favorites, you're not going to be buying all these other accessories. I feel like, at least for me, I whittled down the abilities I was going to be using in the game quite quickly. And yes, I would experiment here or there, but not enough so that I'd have to go and buy new equipment or set abilities before figuring out if I wanted to use them or not. So yeah, it was just really weird to have all this cash and then nothing to do with it. And yes, we could use it to buy accessories that would either strengthen abilities or reduce the cooldown, but it's like, it never felt like a significant improvement a lot of the time. And when it came to new weapons and armor pieces, that never really felt like anything either. Yes, you get with swords appropriately, your sword would look different with a new weapon skin, but it just felt very light, felt very trite at times. And even when it came to true RPG mechanics like leveling up or getting more strength or HP and stuff like that, it was all very rigid, and it felt super artificial, I guess you could say. I had heard this game was very light in the RPG mechanics before even playing it, and I got to agree. It barely feels like an RPG a lot of the time. Very much just feels like an action game. Nothing wrong with that being an action game, but this is Final Fantasy, and I was expecting a bit more. So that was a bit disappointing. And then the lack of kind of customization for Clive's appearance and stuff like that too. New Game Plus, I did get that new free DLC, so I did get that, and that helped a little bit. But it just felt like with the RPG mechanics on that front as a whole, it just was lacking, and that kind of sucked because I feel like there was an opportunity there to do more in the game. And then even with the AI companions, it would have been nice to, in battle, to maybe just do the odd like team attack or something like that with Clive to just give them more of a visual presence, so Clive just didn't feel alone all the time. The companion characters are so great, they should have utilized them more. That was their biggest failing when it came to the companions. And in terms of replayability, this game doesn't really have any. Unless you want to just experience the game's story and characters again, do not replay this game on the Final Fantasy mode. The Final Fantasy mode was touted as being more difficult and almost like a brand new game, because you're getting all these hard enemies in areas where they weren't before as you're playing through the game again from the very beginning. That's true, but they're all super easy because you have all of your abilities carrying over. I'm fine with going through a game again on New Game Plus and just wiping the floor with everything. I've done that with Chrono Trigger a million times. I'm cool with that, but it's not what was being sold to me. Yes, I have these harder monsters, but I have all my crazy abilities, and I'm kicking this thing's ass pretty much just as quickly as I would without this monster being here and the original enemy monster being here instead. So it was kind of pointless. It's just like, oh, I was expecting kind of something new here, and it's just, yes, I'm getting some visually different monsters, but there's no extra challenge here really. Maybe things are taking a wee bit longer because there's more HP, but I'm so powerful, I'm just gonna kick the crap out of this thing anyway, which was very much the case. The game was actually harder the first time through on normal difficulty, at least for me. So I would say if you're gonna do a Final Fantasy run, I'd give this game a little bit of time to kind of settle before going back to it, maybe forget a little bit about the story and have the novelty of it feeling kind of new again before doing that. And something has to be said for this game's more linear nature. Yes, you get wide open field areas, but it's very much, you're on a set path a lot of the game in terms of where you're going and what you're doing. Yes, there's side quests and stuff like that to do, but they're quite light. And I love it. I love a more linear game generally when it comes to a lot of RPGs, particularly if I'm looking for a good story. Generally speaking, not always, but a lot of the time, if it's more open world, the story's not going to be as good because the pacing's going to be off. Because you're going to be able to go and do this for 10 hours or this for 5 hours before actually getting to the main story, and I like the more focused narrative. It makes for a stronger story, and that's what I'm here for when it comes to RPGs first and foremost generally. Even with these game design flaws, with the off-balance world economy and the light RPG mechanics and the lack of meaningful kind of equipment upgrades and stats and all that stuff, it's still a freaking phenomenal game. It's got the story, it's got the characters, it's got the fun combat, at least for one playthrough. It's all here, and the production values are top-notch. It was an absolute blast of a time. Can't recommend it enough. even for all of this game's annoying little faults, things that just could have been done to make the game that much better, it's still a freaking awesome experience. I will never forget my first playthrough of Final Fantasy XVI. It kept my attention beginning to end. I love seeing how everything panned out, even though the ending, in my opinion, spoilers, I freaking hated this game's ending. I hate the open-ended ending nonsense. I love it very cut and dry. I like to know where everybody stands and basically what the status quo is. I don't like thinking about it afterwards. I like just being able to walk away from it with a sense of kind of catharsis, just like, that was good. Now on to the next thing. I'm not spending hours being pissed off thinking about the ending. And even with that, it didn't keep me from wanting to go through the game again. So that is saying something too, because the journey was just so damn good. But no, Final Fantasy 16, absolutely love it. If you haven't played it, check it out. I'm sure a lot of you have played it by now, but I just wanted to share my thoughts with you. But no, as always, everybody, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this impressions video, and I'll be back with more RPG content soon. Thanks for watching, guys.